cold reckoning, blood on the Delta. Before the tulips, before the windmills, before the world called this place Holland, it was a land of black water, iron skies, and men who named their gods after the storm. This is the story of Sigrid the Unbowed, Leif the Twice Burned, in the dynasty of the Frisian Delta. A story of love weaponized, karma delivered in blood, and a war that began with a kiss and ended with a crown. Year 834. The marshlands of what we now call the Netherlands. Two rival chieftains, Halvard of the Dunes and Gunnulf of the river mouth, had hated each other for 40 years. 40 years of burned longhouses, 40 years of stolen cattle, 40 years of sons who never came home. Then Halvard did something unexpected. He offered his daughter. Her name was Sigrid. She was 22 years old, fluent in 3 languages, trained with a sea axe knife, and the only person in the Dune settlement who Halvard actually feared. Not because she was violent, but because she was right. Always right. Halvard called it a peace offering. Sigrid called it what it was, a sacrifice. She was to marry Leif, Gunnulf's eldest son, a man she had never met, a man whose reputation reached her before his face ever did. They said Leif the Twice Burned had survived 2 longhouse fires, that he had walked out of the second one carrying a child not his own, his back alight, refusing to scream. They said he was fearless. What they didn't say, what no one warned Sigrid about, was that Leif was also in love with someone else. Her name was Astrid, a free woman, a rope maker's daughter. And on the morning of Leif's wedding to Sigrid, Astrid disappeared. No body, no note, no explanation, just gone. Sigrid arrived at the ceremony with a veil and a blade beneath her dress. She did not cry. She did not protest. She simply looked at Leif across the fire, and he looked back. And in that single look, a contract was written between 2 strangers. I know what I am to you, and one day you will know what I am capable of. For 3 years, Sigrid was the perfect chieftain's wife. She managed the stores through a brutal winter when the Rhine froze solid and the fish stopped running. She negotiated with Frankish traders when Leif's temper made diplomacy impossible. She bore him a son, Eric, with dark eyes and a stillness that unnerved everyone around him. And she watched. She watched Gunnulf age into paranoia. She watched Halvard drink himself into irrelevance. She watched the 2 clans strain at their peace like a rope twisted too tight. She also watched Leif. He was not cruel. That surprised her. He was haunted. That intrigued her. Every night he walked to the water's edge, alone. Every night he stood there until the cold drove him back. He never told her what he was looking for. She never asked. Then, in the summer of 837, a trader arrived from the east. He carried amber beads, silver wire, and news. Astrid, the rope maker's daughter, was alive. She had been taken, not by raiders, not by fate, by Gunnulf himself. Leif's own father had paid a merchant to carry Astrid east and sell her contract to a Norse farmstead 3 weeks' sail away, because Gunnulf had decided that a free woman was beneath the alliance he needed, and a son in love was a son he couldn't control. When Leif heard this, he did not rage. He sat down. He sat in the great hall of his father's longhouse, surrounded by his father's men, and he was very, very quiet. Sigrid watched from the doorway, and for the first time since the wedding, she crossed the room and sat beside him, not as a wife performing duty, but as one prisoner recognizing another. She said only 4 words, "What do you need?" That was the beginning of everything. Gunnulf had been a feared man for 50 years. He had built his power on a simple philosophy: control the water, control the people. And in the Frisian Delta, where every field flooded, and every road turned to mud, and every harvest depended on the angle of a single dike, that philosophy made him a king in all but name. But karma does not check who you are before it arrives. Gunnulf had betrayed his son. had stolen a woman's freedom to preserve a political arrangement, had treated people as currency, and slowly, methodically, that currency came due. The Frankish traders whom Sigrid had befriended, she had been quietly feeding them information, not about enemies, about Gunnolf's water systems, his dikes, his floodgates. In the autumn of 138, after 3 days of torrential rain, someone opened the wrong gate at the wrong time. The lower fields flooded. Gunnolf's winter grain, 6 months of survival, rotted in 48 hours. No one was caught, no one confessed. But when Gunnolf's men questioned the gatekeeper, the old man looked them in the eye and said, "Water goes where it chooses. I am only a man." Gunnolf survived the winter, barely. And as he lay shivering and humiliated in a longhouse that suddenly smelled of mold and failure, he understood, without proof, without evidence, that something had turned against him. He just didn't know yet that it lived in his own hall. By 839, the peace between the dunes and the river mouth was fiction. Halvard was dead, fever, in the end, the rumor said poison. His brother Skard took control of the Dunes clan, and Skard was nothing like Halvard. Where Halvard had been calculating, Skard was hungry. He declared the marriage alliance void. He demanded tribute. He burned 2 river-mouth fishing boats to demonstrate he was serious. Gunnolf responded by calling his allies, 3 smaller clans along the coast, who owed him old debts. The Delta War began on a Tuesday in late October. It was not a glorious war. It was a war of ambushes and reed beds, of boats appearing from fog, of men dying in cold water at midnight, and no one knowing who had started what, and everyone certain they were the wronged party. Leif fought for his father because blood demanded it, not because he believed in the cause. He was brilliant in the field, instinctive, terrifying in close combat. But every night he returned to the tent where Sigrid waited with maps and dry clothes and that same stillness. They were, without either of them announcing it, a partnership now. She was his strategy. He was her force. And together, they were something neither Gunnolf nor Skard had anticipated, a third power. Because Sigrid had not been idle. While the 2 old men bled each other over swampland and wounded pride, she had been building something quietly, one relationship at a time. She had the Frankish traders. She had 3 dike keepers who hated Gunnolf. She had the head woman of the marsh settlement to the south, a formidable widow named Halla, who controlled the only dry road through the lower delta. And she had Eric. Her son was 4 years old, dark-eyed, watchful, already watching. The war's turning point did not come on a battlefield. It came in a tent. In November of 839, a messenger arrived in Gunnolf's camp with a proposal from Skard, a secret meeting, a private truce. Terms that would give Skard everything he wanted from the river mouth and leave Leif's branch of the family with nothing. The messenger had been intercepted by Sigrid, and the terms she read made her blood run cold because Skard's offer included one specific clause. Leif would be handed over, alive, as a hostage to guarantee the arrangement. Her husband, traded like cargo by his own father. She had 2 choices: give Leif the letter and watch the family shatter from the inside, or play a longer game. She chose the longer game. She rewrote the letter. Same terms, except in her version, it was Gunnolf who would be handed over, not Leif. She resealed it with Skard's own wax. She had studied his mark for 2 years, purely out of habit, purely because information was the one thing she never stopped collecting. She sent the letter to Gunnolf's inner council, without Gunnolf seeing it. The council read it. 3 men who had been waiting 15 years for permission to replace the old wolf with the younger one saw their moment. Within 6 hours, Gunnolf was under house arrest in his own longhouse, placed there by his own most loyal men, who believed, genuinely believed, that their chieftain had just betrayed them all. Skard arrived for his secret meeting and found not Gunnolf, but Leif, standing with 30 armed men, and a look on his face that said, "I have been 2 steps behind my entire life." not anymore. Skard surrendered without a fight, not because he lacked courage, because he looked at Leif, and then he looked at the woman standing just behind Leif's left shoulder, calm, arms folded, watching him the way a hawk watches something far below, and he understood that he had lost the moment this game began. Gunnolf lived out his days in the longhouse he had built, stripped of authority, fed and sheltered but finished. They say he never asked who had engineered his fall. Maybe he already knew. Leif became chieftain of both the dunes and the river mouth, the first unified leader the Frisian Delta had ever seen. He was 30 years old. Astrid was found, returned, given a home, land, freedom, and a formal apology, which Leif delivered himself on one knee in front of his full council. Sigrid watched that too, and when he stood and walked back to her side, she handed him a cup of mead and said nothing. He said, "Did you know where she was all along?" She said, "I knew where everything was all along." He said, "Why did you help me?" She looked at him for a long moment. "Because you carried a child out of a burning building, and you didn't scream." Eric, their son, would go on to be the greatest chieftain the Delta had ever produced. He would drain the swamps, build the first real roads, create a system of dike management that would outlast him by centuries. Some historians say it was Eric who built the Netherlands. But the Skalds, who always knew more than the historians, they told a different story. They said it was a woman who stood in a doorway on a wedding night with a blade beneath her dress and, a calculation behind her eyes, and decided that survival was not enough, that she would not merely endure the game. She would own it.